Hello and welcome back to the How to Get an Analytics Job Podcast. In this podcast episode, we're going to be talking all about analytics technical interviews. And our guest speaker for this week is none other than Matt Bratton, who is the VP of Analytics at Aplo Software, which is a company that helps nonprofits gather and use their data. Matt has actually built out 2 analytics teams, so he has an in-depth knowledge base when it comes to technical interviews, building analytics teams, and seeing what it takes to become an effective analyst. So what we're going to do is start off the podcast episode with me interviewing Matt on just what is a technical interview. Then we're going to hop over to the interactive section where my student Christina has actually prepared a mock interview for her Tableau consulting project. So if you're new to the podcast, I'm currently teaching the Analytics Minor Capstone at Greensboro College. And I've broken my students into 2 teams and paired them with 2 of my consulting clients. Each of these 2 teams are using Tableau to actually execute on these consulting projects. So we're going to have a mock interview where Matt interviews Christina and she explains the project that she's working on in my Analytics Minor Capstone class. Then we're going to round out the episode with our social media manager, Al Bellamy, and he's going to facilitate the Q&A. And these are LinkedIn submitted questions. So if you want to actively participate in what we have going on, head over to LinkedIn and follow our How to Get an Analytics Job LinkedIn page. Each week, we give you an opportunity to participate in the conversation, and we may even choose one of your questions to ask the guest lecturer for that week. This podcast episode is brought to you by Panoply. Panoply makes it easy for you to connect to over 60 different data sources, where you can analyze your data in SQL, visualize it in tools like Power BI or Tableau, or even analyze it in your favorite coding language. Click the link in the description down below and you can get a free 14-day trial to panoply.io. One more thing before we actually jump into the episode. If you are getting value out of the content that we're putting out, the best thing that you can do to give back to us is to like this video, leave a comment down below, or even share this on social media. This will help boost our signal out in the algorithm so that we can help even more people get an analytics job. Also, don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell. With all that being said, let's jump into the podcast episode. Matt Bratton, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm very good. I'm very good. I'm super excited to be here. Any opportunity to promote all things analytics is good in my book. So I'm genuinely happy to be here talking with you guys.
So for those of you guys who are listening, I didn't realize that, Matt, you've built up 3 different analytics teams. And we have kind of pivoted our conversation from just analytic advice in general to we're going to be focusing now specifically on analytics technical interviews. So what does that even mean? I feel like I'm an entrepreneur. I don't think I've ever been through an analytics technical interview before.
Man, so I think along similar lines with like the different guests that you have on here, you get a lot of different flavors, right? So I've heard stories, I've experienced stories where you go into an interview and those people are hardcore, want the technical stuff. They are technical people. And it's kind of like a meeting of the minds in that regard. Like, so I've done interviews with like Goldman Sachs and others for investment banking roles. Those are intense and can be very technical at some points. And then on the flip side, I've done consulting interviews where it's like brain teasers and lots of situational type stuff. So I feel like in the analytical space, we're still sort of finding our groove, and there's a lot of variety that you could potentially experience in those situations. So they're always going to want to make sure that you've got some level of technical acumen that is consistent or congruent with the role that you're looking for. And in order to figure that out, a lot of times I like to think about it like, you know, when you're going through school, a lot of times people don't like the word problems on math, right? But it's an application of a technical skill in like a real world situation. So the way that I've most experienced and the way that I like to deliver technical type questions is in the realm of like storytelling. So tell me about a time, and you home in on a skill. So if I want to gauge how good someone is in Excel, I'll say, tell me about a time where you either built or inherited a specific file, and what was it that made that process, difficult or challenging, and what did you learn from it? And that just opens the doors to all sorts of things that I could poke on, ask questions about. And it's disguised as a way to sort of let someone articulate their experience, but you can zoom in wherever you want and really start to get a sense for the technical skill that they have, because your ability to explain something in a concise way is a very clear indicator of whether or not you understand it or how deep you understand it. So I like to play, that game. Interviewing is all about storytelling.
Interesting. So you know what? I misspoke. I think I had a potential technical interview and it kind of came off to me as a red flag. So
Ooh.
this was because I've gone through a couple pitfalls where like there have been probably 3 times in the past 5 years where I like had multiple things fall through at once. And then I was like, man, should I just stop and like get a job? But during that
Don't quit.
time where I had multiple things fall through, so like 2 client proposals, they just said, we're not going to go. And I was like, how am I going to make rent? I started applying for jobs, and one of my friends knew someone who had a startup, and what they wanted me to do was do free work for them to test my ability. And I was like, I'm not going to give you my time and energy to work on one of your projects. That feels...
That's a red flag.
Right. That feels predatory, right?
It does. And it's unfortunately, I don't want to say common practice, but it is a practice in all fields, not just analytics, but I could see it being exploited on analysts for sure.
Well, I mean, yeah, I felt like I was about to be taken advantage of. Like I was kind of vulnerable. I was like in a really low point, and I was almost like, I'll do anything I can just to kind of get out of this rut that I'm in. And then, I mean, ultimately I was like, this doesn't feel right. It feels like you're setting a very poor precedent in that situation, because it's like my time is valuable. And if you don't value me, I don't want to partner, collaborate, or be associated with you. Because like, that's something that, I don't know, we talk about quite a bit, like in my friend circle around, you don't ever want to do free work. I mean, unless it's like a volunteer philanthropic thing. But if a client comes to you and says, oh, do this project for free or greatly discounted, and then it'll lead to more work, you've then set a poor precedent. And
yeah, if you're going to do free work, it should be on your terms, right? You should be the one offering your services because you're trying to prove something. But if someone's actively soliciting you for free work, I mean, they're looking for free work. There's no really beating around the bush on that. So I would point to a situation like that and say that's a perfect opportunity to show off a portfolio or to share an example of your work. And if they want more information, then they can have a conversation about it. But simply asking you to do something that's going to benefit them without a clear, deliverable at the end of it that is going to be mutually beneficial, I think you're right to see red flags in that regard.
Because I guess, and this is kind of an area where I just don't know very much. When my interpretation of a technical interview was that you had to do work. Like I have had students of mine, like on my courses, they were looking at an entry-level Tableau position, and they had them like do a little mini case study. I mean, it wasn't work that they were going to go and then push on to a client. But it was like, I think maybe a questionnaire, and then like, here's a data source. You have 2 days before the interview, show up with a dashboard. And
got it.
Is that typical or is that atypical?
No, that is a thing. That is a thing. So I guess I kind of glossed over the idea that, so there's the face-to-face where you're having a discussion and you're talking about this stuff, but oftentimes, and I see this fairly consistently. In fact, I mean, I administer a technical Excel test in my interviews in the past. That's something that I've done. I've developed certain tests and I've experienced them at other companies. So that is 100% a thing. And it's to, I think, the point of this discussion where it's not like work, it's a case study or it's a practice thing where they're just wanting to see your proficiency. But again, so this is, it's kind of funny that we're going about it in this way. So what I came out the gates saying was that I will disguise, not maliciously, but disguise technical questions in a behavioral type interview question. The technical, like case studies, are also, they're almost behavioral disguised as technical. So there's a flip side to this where, if this is a little secret of when I would administer the tests, is that I would be checking in on people. So I give them a test, I leave them in the room, I come in and I check on them, see how you're doing. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, I'm good. And then 9 times out of 10, they never got anywhere on the test, even though they were saying, I'm good. It's like, okay, this was an opportunity. I tried to make them very welcome, make them understand that if you get stuck, ask a question. This is something that we can talk about. And so it is an opportunity to demonstrate your willingness to learn. You're not afraid to ask questions. You're curious. You want to understand this, and like, you're teachable, right? So that doesn't mean that if you're given something and you say, I'm a master of Excel, and this job requires an advanced level of Excel, and then you completely bomb the test because you don't even know how to open an Excel file, you're not going to get the job, even if you're a nice guy. But at least show that you're willing to learn, acknowledge where you actually stand. And then, who knows, maybe they'll think, okay, that person actually showed that they were interested in learning, and it was a revelation that they didn't know as much as they thought. We'll keep that person in mind, that sort of thing. Like, that happens. The people who aced my test didn't just automatically get the job. I had to see that they were open to learning. They asked the right questions. When I gave them feedback, they took it, that sort of thing. So there's behavior in those components. And I can give one quick example of a test that I took for a company, actually, that's blowing up these days, GameStop. I interviewed there back in the day.
Wow.
Kind of on a whim. Yeah. And I was at their office. It was like a full day of interviews with a lot of different people. There was a point I asked about their business model being sustainable, and they didn't like that, but so here we are. But there was a technical test. They gave me an Excel test. And what happened was they put a laptop in front of me and had me do it. But then the guy sat next to me the whole time, just talking to me, just spitballing, and like constantly checking, like, asking me crazy questions about myself, my life, and then go, how are you doing on the test? How are you doing on the test? We finally got done. I worked through it. It was fine, but it was almost like a quasi stress test as well to see, can you work under pressure? Can you work with these people? I knew what they were doing, right? So you need to be aware of that as well. And then there's the other flavor where it's like a take home test. And then it's like, how well do you present what you've done? There's always going to be some level of behavior and technical in any type of question that you get. I think that's the punchline.
Okay. Yeah, I've been in one of those interviews, and honestly, I've been in an interview where the interviewer pushed too hard, and I did not like them. And then I got the job, I accepted the job, and I did not like them the entire time. I think that, it was a 3-month internship, so I really counted as a blessing in that I had a terrible experience, but it only lasted 3 months of my life. So that lesson was, it was a struggle to get through those 3 months, but man, oh man, did I learn a lot about the type of people. Well, actually, I was going to say the type of people I want managing me. The lesson I ultimately learned is, like, I don't want a manager. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm unemployable.
Equally valuable.
Right.
One thing that I find myself having to remind people is that the interview is a two-way street, right? Just because you get an offer doesn't mean you have to take it. If it's a bad fit, these taking on a new position should be, they want you and you want them. It shouldn't be they want you and you just need a job. Unfortunately, some people have to make that decision, and I respect that. But if you're in a position where you've got bad vibes, man, maybe you should think twice about it. If there's red flags during the interview process, you are going to spend most of your waking hours with these people. Remember that, right? And fit is a very, very real thing. And so especially I don't know how far we want to go, or if we even want to get into like the behind the scenes stuff, but man, sometimes, everybody's just being cordial, but you get clues into someone, some of their tics, some of their behavior, and you're like, man, this is not going to work on the team. And then, ultimately they get rejected. And then if they get upset, it's like, look, man, it wasn't going to work. We know that. We know that this sort of thing, it's a difficult line, but there is a fit component that always needs to be remembered, right? Mm-hmm. And it goes both ways.
What's funny is I feel like we keep circling back to soft skills and soft skills and soft skills, and I feel like I'm a broken record.
It's by
But
design.
well, okay, where I want to kind of guide the conversation next is that you said it's not only about knowing how to do something, but unpacking the work that you've done and the thought process behind it. Can you tell a little bit about how do you, I guess, measure that skill set, that storytelling, that soft skills kind of acumen in a technical interview?
It's storytelling. I mean, am I interested listening to this person talk, or are they just rattling off keywords, right? So people have a tendency to just bust out resumes and cover letters with keyword all over them, right? And then if you're in an interview and they're just using buzzwords and saying stuff and there's no substance, then, the conversation when they leave the room is going to be, we're all going to look at the resume, go like, I liked what they said here. I didn't quite understand this. This didn't work well. At the end of a good interview, no one's holding the resume. They feel like they know that person. They feel like, yeah, when they said this, like that really hit home, and that's going to be really helpful here, and that sort of thing, right? So the extent to which you are able to always be injecting stories and framing what the ultimate message is that you're trying to convey, the better off, the more memorable that you're going to be, so that when you leave that room, everybody just has the resume on the table and they're looking around. Another key, like, you are the most qualified person on earth to tell your story, right? So when people come in and they either ask for a copy of their resume, which is very sad, or they're holding their resume when they're doing the whole walk me through your resume thing and kind of reading it, it's like, you're missing the point. I already got your resume. Your resume is just like the bones, the skin of the bones. I want you to bring the soul. I want you to bring your story to this table so that we come away knowing who you are. And so it's more than just yourself and what your ambition and what you're all about and what you're trying to accomplish, but then also all of the little bells and whistles, all the skills, they need to have a little story behind each one. Like, how do you use this? Where did you learn it? Why is this important? And do you understand how that might be valuable to us? So I'm not sure if I've directly answered your question, but it all comes back to your ability to take a hard skill and translate it into a story. So if you know X, then okay, what's your story on how you got there? And make me care, make me know, and have confidence that you understand that.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of it has to do with lateral thinking. So knowing where to push the buttons, how to connect to data, how to tie them together, like the very specific tactics on any given platform are not nearly as important as conceptualizing the problem and then solving it with the interface. And I think that is really where the narrative structure comes into play.
You're the analyst. I don't care what tool you use, but if you know what a shovel does, explain to me that you know what a shovel does. If that shovel is Tableau, if that shovel is Power BI, if that shovel happens to be Excel, I don't care. If you know how to use it, great. If you understand what its purpose is, great. Here at this company, we use this brand of shovel, but since you understand how shovels work, I have confidence that you're going to pick it up, right? That's also cultural. There's some places who are just like, they don't know how to do this. I'm going to ding them. You don't want to work there anyway. So yeah, they did you a favor.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some common mistakes? So you've built 2 analytics teams. You're about in the process to start hiring for your 3rd analytics team. What are the most common problems you see from, I guess, well, we can go in multiple directions, really. The interview process, like what are the most like common mistakes? And then once you've hired someone as their analytics manager, kind of where do people go awry and kind of frustrate you?
So 2 questions. So what are common mistakes that people make? You're talking about just on the inbound, like trying to get a job. Is that what you're saying?
Let me rephrase. Are there any red flags when it comes to technical interviews?
Yeah, I think just an inability to really instill confidence that you know what you're talking. No, I'm going to rephrase that. Lying is basically what it boils down to. So if you tell me that you're an expert in something and you can't answer basic questions, yet you can continue to insist that what you know is sufficient, then we're on different pages and you've just lied to me, or you're trying to sell me something that I'm not buying. So that's it. If, and this has happened, we're having a discussion around technical skills, and we, through that discovery process, it goes from, enthusiasm talking about something. And then I ask questions, kind of poke down, you go like, I don't know, like, what would you do? Or how does this work? And it turns into a conversation. Then you're not lying to me anymore. You're showing me that you're willing to learn, or you're curious, or you're interested, right? So you're demonstrating more of your character and more of what makes you a good analyst, right? Ultimately, because that's what we're trying to get.
So there's a difference between lying and being wrong.
Absolutely. I think so.
How can you suss that out? So like if you double down on a question and you start to kind of peel back the layers and they don't know, but they still maintain that frame of like, I'm the expert here. Oh, and then they try to use jargon and just, I don't know, talk in circles.
Then the interview is going to wrap up real quick. I mean, and that's happened. Like, we'll have to put our, like, okay, look, I'm sorry, this isn't going to be a good fit.
Yeah.
End of discussion. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. And obviously you want to do that tactfully and give immediate feedback, right? I have this crazy thing where I don't like having people leave not knowing where they stand, right? And that honesty needs to go both ways. There needs to be trust. So you have to make sure that if you're communicating something, it's like, look, I'm not buying it. So these are things that I think that you need to work on. And at this company, this is the sort of thing that we're looking for in this role. So, as we expand, what you do could be more valuable, but, for right now, this isn't going to work. Now, if they're wrong, like, the other question was like, how do you deal with being wrong? Or what was the question?
I guess the question was, how do you suss out someone lying versus being wrong? Because they both, it seems like a little bit of a deception there, or like maybe there's a discrepancy between what they put in the resume. Because this actually relates back to one of our interviews from like a year ago with Alex, the analyst. And Alex Freeberg actually kind of, it's funny because I would love to have a conversation with you and Alex, because he basically flubbed, like he says that he like lied about his technical acumen, but they liked him enough that they hired him anyways. And then he said 2 months into working there, they were like, yeah, we knew you didn't know Python.
And you know what? It boils down to the way I started this conversation was, everybody's different, right? So everybody's got their own things, red flags, what they're looking for. If he sold himself, and maybe the way that part of the conversation came about was they kind of got a sense that, okay, he doesn't really know, but he doesn't know what he doesn't know, but we're okay with that, right? Okay. So maybe that's the line that we're talking about, is like, is it malicious, or are you doubling down on something that everybody in the room is aware is not true? So it's kind of, it's that level that we're looking for. No malintent.
Yeah. So maybe he was just being hyperbolic and humorous when he said I lied in the interview. Like maybe, well, I don't know. That's such a kind of a gray area, because if in his skill section of his resume, it says proficient in Python, and then he gets in there and then he's not, and they find that out, but he handles it with, I guess, grace, or
with tact,
and he's like, oh, you know what? I realized that, maybe I'm only a beginner, or I'm new to this and I didn't realize how deep it went.
Yeah. It's always possible. I mean, I'm not going to dispute it.
Good. Okay. So biggest red flag in an interview is don't bold-faced lie. And then if you get caught in a, situation where you don't know as much as they thought you did, don't double down and pretend to be the expert. Just admit it and say, you know what, maybe I don't know that as well as I thought I did.
Yeah. And it's more than that. You can take that a step further and offer up yourself to make it a teaching moment, right? A teachable moment where you take that immediate feedback and you're like, oh crap, I'm not where I thought I was. But can you help me understand that a little bit more? So that's also a thing that you can do. And I just want to I'm going to double down a little bit on the idea of the malintent and why that's important. One of the most dangerous things that an analyst can do is find errors or flaws in what they're doing and not tell anyone and let it run amok, right? I've seen this where I've caught things that turns out had been known issues in published reporting for a period of time. And the reason that they didn't speak up was because they didn't want to get in trouble. And so I took that as a reflection on myself, but it's also a corporate thing, right? So there's other issues at play, but people have to be comfortable speaking up and saying, I found an issue. So then we can work together and rectify it immediately. Don't let those things compound. So in the world of performing analytical work, you have to be honest. You have to be transparent. You have to speak up when something is not right. Errors happen. Things happen. We're all human, and your confidence and comfort level with speaking up on those things is going to be very indicative of how far you go. But a lot of that, again, I take ownership, is on the environment that you operate in, and if they stand for that sort of thing. As long as you're in an environment that promotes that sort of thing, then you're in a good place.
This point leads kind of to that second question of what do you look for, what makes a good analyst? And it sounds like having good character and like a strong ethical frame, because essentially what that analyst was doing in that situation was avoiding a short-term discomfort or scolding at the cost of potentially giving a recommendation on bad data that could lead to hundreds, if not millions of dollars of lost profit or additional cost or revenue. Right. Yeah. I mean, it could be a lot. Sure. And that does kind of take courage to have those uncomfortable conversations. And I think that I like that we haven't really talked about like character yet. I feel like we're slowly turning into like a self-development, inspiration, like, I don't know, growth mindset podcast, which has like not been what I was
sorry about that.
Okay. So simply put, what makes a good analyst other than a strong ethical frame?
Someone who's curious and who is willing to see through that curiosity, right? So letting it take them wherever it takes them. And there was actually just some banter on LinkedIn this morning about Mr. Gilbert posted a diagram, and it showed like the progression of an analyst and like the type of service that an analyst will provide at the different levels. And at the very top was this intrapreneur concept. And that's something that I've talked about a lot, is that, in fact, it's going to be probably a topic of one of my videos, is the idea that analysts should kind of be entrepreneurial. So it's more than just curiosity, but it's entrepreneurial in that if you see a need within the business, you should go try to fill that need. And that will kind of guide your career. So I don't want to get too far off track, but there's this idea that, you get hired for a role. And if you perform that role well, good, but don't expect to get promoted for doing your job, right? The way that you get promoted, the way that you get recognized is by going above what you were hired for. This is in most companies, right? So that curiosity, that entrepreneurial, intrapreneur attitude is what's going to take you here. So you're working on something here that's part of your job description, but you catch conversations in the hallway that somebody says they wish they could see XYZ. What's stopping you from exploring XYZ, right? And then sharing that information. So that to me is what a good analyst would do. They would hear, their ears would be buzzing, going, that's a good question. I'm curious, do we have the data to do that? And then they can just explore. And then they take the initiative. So I guess it's curiosity, initiative, an entrepreneurial spirit, and a comfort or a confidence in, maybe that's not the right thing.
See, I would call that founder's mentality.
Sure.
Because essentially, like, I don't know if you've ever heard that term, but I mean, that's really why I brought Al on as a social media manager, because he said, I feel really invested in this podcast. It's helped me a lot. I'm invested in the growth of this. How can I help? And then I was like, well, okay, let's do a 1-month experiment where you take over the social media. It's something that you can put on your resume as kind of a portfolio piece. And then it led to him wanting to kind of continue to grow that.
Yeah.
And he's invested in like the success. I think a lot of people it's like they punch their time card and they're in and they're out. But the people who actually like care and want to like genuinely care. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of the HR people are like, this is my work family. And it's all cheesy. I'm like talking about like actually not like that surface level, I just want to play the political game. But yeah, it's kind of, there's like ownership there of like, and I think that's interesting because I have heard that term. It's been years of entrepreneur, but it's like entrepreneurship within an organization, right?
Yeah.
I guess I'm just an entrepreneur, and I have like strategic partners with like Greensboro College and HPU and, my client businesses or my clients, but it is interesting seeing kind of that. I don't know how to explain that other than, I guess, founder's mentality.
No, I think you nailed it too. With two key words that I caught there were caring. You have to care, and you have to have a sense of ownership. Like those two things are imperative. So we'll go ahead and add those to the list. Where I was actually going to go with it a little bit too, and this is something that has taken a lot of time to learn, and I will continue to learn throughout my career, is this may sound stupid, but I've got this rule. I call it the no babies rule, and it's not what it sounds like. It's more, when somebody has a baby, you got a beautiful baby, nobody talk bad about the baby, even if it's an ugly baby. You don't say that. It's a beautiful baby. It's your baby. When you're an analyst and you have a baby, you make a product, you do something, and you put it out into the world. If it's ugly, people are going to tell you that it's ugly. That ain't your baby anymore. Like that is out in the wild for all to consume. And any feedback you get, you need to understand that that baby is out of the nest and all bets are off. So if you produce something that gets scrutinized, you can't take that personally. You can't get offended. You were the one that released it into the wild. If the criticism is valid, you need to hear it and you need to take it, and you need to have thick skin and an ability to go, you're right. Okay. And fix it. Like these are always going to be amorphous. You're never going to hit a home run every time that you deploy something. There's always going to be tweaks. There's always going to be something, and it's always going to be sort of an organic, iterative process before you reach full production, right? Mm-hmm. Even full production, there's still going to be enhancements. So you need to have this comfort level with putting your work out there, having it scrutinized, and taking that feedback, and that's going to help you grow. It's not comfortable, but it's a very important idea that I don't know that I hear a lot of people talking about. But it's something I think that, again, I still work on it, but it has served me well, getting to points where I'm just like, have at it, give me feedback. What do you hate about it? Beat them to the punch. Just have people pick it apart. When you initiate, it gets a little bit easier. But
I love that you just brought that up, because Christine and I were just having a conversation about this, about the iterative nature of the consulting engagement we're having through the Greensboro College Analytics Minor Capstone. Because essentially, Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys put a prototype out, and then how many meetings have you guys had with the president of that company? Has it been 3 or 4?
I think it's been about 4 meetings. Yeah.
So I guess kind of walk us through, what was the first prototype? Was it just very, very simple, and then he started to kind of ask additional questions? How did you guys start to iterate? Because for those of you who are listening, we just had a meeting with the president of this company, and I mean, this is a 9-figure business. I mean, it's a big company, and they're helping design some analytics infrastructure. And he was extremely complimentary. He was like, wow, I can't believe the actual tactics and the Tableau skills that the students are bringing to the table.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. So like when we first got the data from him, the first meeting was kind of about asking him how all the sources kind of overlap because they were from different sources. So we were looking at ad spend data from different channels, including Amazon, Google Ads, and Facebook. And so when we got the data, because it was from different sources, it was like formatted very differently. So at first it was kind of hard to see how they all fit together and how we would all fit them together in a dashboard. So I think the first meeting was kind of just asking him like, okay, how does this go in with this sheet? Like, how do we connect that and make it work? And then after he kind of explained, you know, how it all fits together, we were able to build out it was like a team of 3. So we all kind of built our own dashboards and we would get together and kind of see like who was able to do what with the data. And then one of the biggest issues we had was connecting all the data sources together because they were so different. So it wasn't as simple as just like dragging something in and it would like connect with a common column. So it got me looking into like, okay, how do you connect this data and how do you make it work? And that's how I learned about like data scaffolding.
So we're getting ahead of ourselves because this is part of the interactive kind of mock Tableau technical interview that Matt's going to be getting into.
Okay.
But basically, so you guys, kind of what I was trying to communicate is that you developed an understanding of the data sources. Didn't you build a prototype dashboard?
Yes.
And then he gave feedback on what was wrong with it, which actually there was a data quality issue. And he said, well, this chart's wrong. And then I remember, last class actually, we went through the data and then I helped you kind of create this email that screenshotted the data source and said, look, here's the data you've sent us. We don't have ad spend for 8 months. And this is not on our end. This is coming from the data source you sent. And then he was like, oh, great catch. We forgot to add this filter or something. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Right.
So it was really cool kind of, oh man, I'm so proud of you guys. And also this project is so cool that, you got to work with a decision maker in a large business. You got to scope out a project. You guys executed on it. And now you're presenting it. And I'm kind of in the background. I did give you the term data scaffolding, but I'm sure if you would have Googled, you would have figured out that was the term involved.
It might have taken a little longer, but yeah.
That's true. So I give you a little bit of guidance and structure, but Matt, let's actually jump into the interactive portion where we're going to have you give Christina a technical Tableau interview. And I'm kind of I want to just sit back and watch and kind of see you run her through this framework of that you put together over the past 2 data analytics teams that you developed.
Sure. And I guess just to preface, you want me to effectively be in character to some point, or do you want me to interject with immediate, like on the spot feedback, or how do you want me to do that?
Okay, so essentially the structure is, because for those of you listening, we've prepped this. So you're going to ask the general question of tell me about a project, and then you're going to be like, okay, in your resume you said that you researched and implemented data scaffolding. Can you explain this topic? Which is, it's not a simple topic. It's not like something. It's not like create a simple join. It's like you actually had to research that, Christina, and it took you a couple tries and attempts to like really get it nailed down.
All right. Going into character.
So character. Yeah. So, okay. So my answer to your question is let her kind of respond to your broad question of tell me about your project, your narrative. Then we can critique that. then you can say, we can hop back into character and say, oh, I see in your resume, data scaffolding. Can you tell me about this specific
all right
concept?
We will let nature run its course. Perfect. Okay. Hey, Christina, how you doing? You look frozen, actually.
Oh, wow. Perfect timing.
See, you scared her off. All of your talking about what's coming just spooked her.
The timing on that couldn't have been any worse. I wonder if here, let me stop her video and wait. Okay. Can you turn your video? I just turned your video off. Can you turn it back on?
It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Oh no. Asked to start video. Okay, cool. The timing of that freeze is so funny. Okay, I think. Uh-oh, did you freeze again? Christina.
You guys are frozen for me.
Oh no, I wonder if we're having an internet connectivity issue.
Okay, you're back.
Okay.
It does say my internet connection is stable and I don't know what to do about it.
Network bandwidth. How about this? Just turn your camera off, and I think maybe that'll do better. I mean, the audience isn't going to get to see you communicate it, but they'll be able to hear.
That's okay. I usually use too many hand motions anyway, so.
More than
okay.
better.
All right. I'm heading back to the background. Matt, I'll let you take it from here.
Hey, Christina, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing very good. I am very much looking forward to hear all about your experiences with Tableau. I understand you've recently wrapped up, or you're in the process of doing some big project for a company. So I was hoping that you could maybe share with me a little bit about that process and maybe some of the key takeaways that you've had.
So we're still in the process of finishing the final project, and it is split into different parts. So we're just wrapping up the first part, which included looking at ad spent data for this company. It was a team of 2 other students who were also analyzing the data with me. So it was 3 of us in a class setting.
Okay.
And we were paired with the client of this company who recently released like a new product line. And with that came lots of ad spending to kind of promote the products of the new line. And so we were given the task of analyzing that ad spent data to see how different channels are performing, just to see like what was worth like spending money on ads for. We were given sources from 3 different channels, including Amazon, Google Ads, and Facebook. So we were given the data from these sources, and they were all 3 very different sources. So we had to find a way to kind of connect everything together and build out a dashboard.
Can you explain a little bit what, you've got 3 different data sources, Amazon, Facebook, and Google. What was the type of data that you were getting from each of these sources? Just curious.
So for example, for like Facebook and Amazon, we had like number of transactions. And then
what's a transaction?
So somebody like going through and like clicking on an ad and then it leading them to buy a product. And so like if they buy a product, that's a transaction.
Okay, so a purchase is a transaction, and that's what you were tracking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and then also clicks, so how many clicks the ads were getting on each channel. And that was a metric that was for every single source we had. Also impressions, so how many times somebody would see the ad or it would like go across their feed, even if it didn't mean that they clicked on it necessarily, as well as like the average, I think it was like the average time that was spent on like a certain page after they clicked on it. And so all those different metrics, and they were all different for every channel and labeled a different way. So we kind of had to sort through the different keywords that they used.
Give me a sense for just how big this data set, like how far back are we looking? Did they just launch and it's a couple months, or was it like a year? Was it a week? What are we talking about here?
So I believe they launched the product line, I think it was in 2019, and we had data from 2020. So we just had 2020 data. I think we had maybe a couple of data points from like late 2019, but it was mainly just the year of 2020 and how it performed there.
Okay. And the client pulled all this data for you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you have to request it, or did they just say, this is what you will need?
I believe they just sent it to us, like saying, this is what you'll need. We also were working with another person that was working like for marketing, I believe. So he also may have given input into what we would have needed, but I'm not entirely sure about that. I just know we received those data sources.
Okay. So how did the deliverable go?
So we presented, first we presented one prototype of like the dashboard, and, we were still trying to figure out like exactly what the client needs were. So he gave us some good feedback on things that were like he really liked about the dashboard, and then other things that he either didn't like, or he was like, okay, this isn't really useful. Like, you don't necessarily need to put this in here. Maybe replace it with this. Or just like, I don't like how this
Can you give
looks.
me maybe an example of what he liked and what he didn't like?
So one example was the ad spending, for like, he liked how we had broken it down like for every month. And he also wanted to see how it compared across different channels on different sheets. So instead of having it all on a single graph for like Amazon, Google, and Facebook, he wanted to see them all on separate graphs. So that was like one of the small things that he wanted changed. As well as he wanted to see like the number of transactions as a KPI card, instead of like something else we had on there, which might have been clicks.
Okay. How do you feel it went?
I think it went really well. I definitely learned a lot through the process. I had never really dealt with a client like that before, so I wasn't really sure what to expect at the beginning. But I think it went really well. He seemed to be really pleased with what we delivered to him.
Did you expect them to be like harder to work with, or what was it that surprised you?
Yeah, so I thought they were gonna have more like, I guess, like they wanted more of like a technical drill down where we would have to like figure out certain like calculations with the data. But it really was just more of like I want to visualize this in this certain way so that I can pull some good information out of it.
So you thought maybe they'd be wanting like significant drill down capability where you can get really far into the weeds, really interactive, but that's not necessarily what they were looking for?
Right, exactly.
Okay. Well, good. If there was like one punchline, one sentence that you would use to like kind of wrap up that experience to really let me take away, what would it be?
It was, I would say it was a great experiential learning experience where, I really felt like getting my hands on this real data, I was able to apply what I had been learning in the classroom and see how, one day I will be able to do this for a job, hopefully in the future.
Cool. Okay. I'm good with that section. I don't know if we want to immediately give some feedback or what, but first off, Christina, great job. This is a safe space. So any feedback you get, you need to just be like open and willing and excited to use this so that you can just continue to
they have some thick skin.
A better product, right?
They're used to being criticized. In fact, they probably criticize me the most. I'm the one who gets all of the criticism.
Oh,
Yeah,
good.
So,
I'm perfectly fine with criticism.
Good.
The more the merrier.
All right. So I guess with that in mind, the little punchline that you wrapped up with is almost like what I would consider your leader. If you were to be asked this question again, is like, man, we had this opportunity to get real data from a real company and help them solve a real problem. And the experience of digging into actual data from these different systems and marrying it up and visualizing it so that they could help make a decision was super awesome. And let me tell you about what we did and how we did it. And then you kind of drill down into, the process. You don't need to get too far into the weeds unless they start poking. So I poked a couple times, but I didn't want to go too far. I think it's more like framing, what is the problem you're trying to solve? So tell me a story about this problem that you were invited to help solve. So yeah, so this big company has this new product that they just launched, and we were asked to help them figure out their ad spend. So I was super pumped. I got to go in and get some experience. We talked to them. We learned that most of their information is coming from Facebook and Google and Amazon. They're running their ads. All their campaigns are going through Facebook. They've got some ad spend from AdSense and YouTube. I don't know if that's true, but like just talk very high level about the data sources and that they kicked it over to you. And then once you got it and you understood what they wanted from it, like how you worked as a team, like there's so many different little side message and stories that you could tell through this process about not only do you have hands-on experience, you've got like that technical stuff, you worked as a team, you communicated with the executives, you coordinated this process, you delivered, you presented. Like there's so many great nuggets in there. And it just kind of gets lost when you're like focused on, we did this and then we did this and then we did this, right? Okay. So take a step back. I know you're in the weeds, and this is one of the hardest things, even, going from weeds to presentation. But when you're interviewing, start here. And then if you got to go down, you can, but like really work on the summary, work on the punchline, and make sure that you get that delivered. And then they're going to have a more visual experience, like thinking about, the running of the reports and all that kind of fun stuff. So that's my gut reaction. I don't know what other feedback y'all have.
So let me put on my professor hat here.
Uh-oh.
So Christina, you did all right. Could be better. No, you did a great job. I'm just teasing you. Although I think there are key things that are missing from this. So number one, you missed out on, you met with the marketing agency that they're marketing with to get kind of the project scoped out. So Ryan Forrest is actually one of my best friends, kind of entrepreneur buddies. He runs his own marketing agency. Back, I don't know, man, that was like 4 years ago. I connected my client with him, and now he runs the marketing for them. So you could say something along the lines of, I interfaced with the president and the marketing agency of, this large organization. I helped get clarity around which of the marketing channels had the highest return on investment. So we looked at Facebook advertisements. We looked at, I'm blanking on the other two. What were they? Facebook
and Amazon and Google.
And we found that the biggest return on investment from an ad spend perspective was that they need to double down on their Amazon ads. So, I think that kind of gives a high level. Matt, though, I'm kind of curious, is that important? Because I think that showing that you are talking to multiple, departments of an organization or functions of an organization, distilling down the most important information and giving actionable recommendations to the decision maker in an organization is pretty valuable.
Absolutely. Yeah. All of that. Communication. So the idea that it's difficult to convey soft skills in an interview it's not silly. It's a very common question, but the whole thing of the question is like, if you're interacting with someone, you're exhibiting your soft skills. If you're telling about these experiences, then you're exhibiting soft skills. So the fact that you had an objective, you, by most accounts, sounds like you achieved that objective. You've got your punchline. And in order to achieve that objective, you had to work with multiple parties, coordinate requesting of data, sizing up the issue, making sure that you understood the data, normalizing, all that fun stuff. So yes, that is absolutely beneficial to highlight. And I think, John David, you just mentioned something that even I overlooked, but what was the ultimate thing? So the ultimate thing was we helped them identify what their most profitable channel was so that they could decide where they want to continue turning that dial up, right? So getting to that punchline, whetting their appetite, like, ooh, value. This person has done work that has driven actionable insights that create value. That's good, right? Value, good. Plant that seed and then reinforce the heck out of it. So that's good feedback. I think that's important.
Well, what I think is so cool about this is that you went to the president of this organization to scope out a project. Then you went to the marketing department to get insight on how to really do the analysis. So you're talking to the subject matter expert about their area of domain and what are the most important data points and how can we conduct this analysis? Because yeah, initially they did have all of the marketing data combined into one chart. And then Ryan said, hey, let's actually break these apart and then let's calculate the return on investment for ad spend for each of these individual channels. That will really, from his perspective, it's more money for fungi. So if he can prove that, one of these channels is, every dollar they put in, the client gets $2 back, then he can all of a sudden justify a $50,000 marketing proposal or something like that. So it's interesting kind of getting the different perspectives and takes across the organization. Because, the client is overseeing everything. So you created a lot of value by communicating what he thought he wanted, double checking it with the person who is basically owning that process and the data with that process, and then coming back to him with like a slight modification. So it's like you're getting iterations, not only from the president, but also from the marketing agency that's running their ads as well.
Yep. Yeah. And a video I did recently called Analytics as a Team Sport. It's all about exactly what you're talking about, where you shouldn't be or be expected to be a subject matter expert in every single thing, right? You, even as an analyst, you are a consultant internally for the business. So you should be comfortable knowing where your limits of expertise lie. So if you're getting one request from over here that involves this group over here, don't just go start pulling data. Make sure you've got the whole story. So go talk to marketing, go back and talk to this person, CEO or whoever it was, and make sure like, okay, we're corroborating stories. We're all on the same page. It's go time. And that's just going to save a lot of churn. It's going to build rapport, build trust, so that when you present your findings, marketing doesn't go like, where'd you get that? Like, where'd that come from? Doesn't matter if it's accurate. They weren't involved. So it's immediately suspect, right? So there's so much value to be had with that communication. And so not only demonstrating that you've had it, but just getting that extra buy-in just bolsters up everything that you've done. So good.
Awesome.
Thanks for the feedback.
Well, we still got one more question.
Oh, okay.
So Matt, if you want to drill down on, so I think this will be valuable just so the audience can see what it's like, what you're looking for when you ask about specific technical aspects of a tool or an analytics process.
Yeah. Okay. So I might actually press a little harder this time, if that's what you want.
Yeah.
So,
I was about to say, Christina, are you feeling bold and brave today? Really strong character? Okay. All right.
All right, Christina. So I was taking a look at your resume, and thank you for explaining that project and working in Tableau. One of the things that it actually highlighted that you said that you were using as a technique was data scaffolding. So I don't hear that term very often, but I'm familiar with it. Tell me a little bit about how you leverage that in this particular process.
So for the different data sources that we had to look at the ad spending data for an entire year, for the 2020 year. And the data that we got didn't have like a date for every single day of the year. So when we tried to pull that into a visualization, it would
they didn't spend money every day of the year is what you're saying.
Right. So it would be like certain transactions, like 1 week of the month and then 2 weeks later. So when we pulled that in, it wouldn't really show that it was like no spending on the certain week. It was just kind of like a continuous line. It looked strange right away when I tried to pull it into the data source.
Yeah.
So I had to figure out a way to, make it so that the visualization showed, okay, this is exactly when you spend the money for the ads, and this is how it compared to the sales or profit you got from it. So the way that I was able to kind of convey that was through data scaffolding. So since you have to create kind of like a temporary artificial structure so that you can pull in your data and arrange it the way you want for a visualization, what I had to do was create a sheet in Excel with just a date for every single day of the 2020 year, and then pull that into the data source, and then join that to every single table that had a date for spending. And then through that, it was able to show like those gaps that didn't show up in the ad spending data. They now were paired with like an actual date instead of just being kind of like connected for no reason.
So you're showing a chart with daily data, and it's for a full year?
So it's for a full year, and then you could break it down like for each month. So for example, during the months of grouping. Right. And so like, for example, for the months of the during the pandemic, they saw sales kind of like shoot up because it's like a hardware company. So, a lot of people were doing like home improvement type of stuff or trying to make their home nice since they were stuck at home, I guess. So really looking at how like, okay, this month of the pandemic, there were like a bunch of sales. And then the month right before, like, how did it compare? Like how do we expect that to compare to next year, perhaps?
Did you do like projections as well? Is that what you're saying?
We didn't do projections, but we did discuss with the client, like, oh, like we noticed that these were the months of the pandemic and you have like really high sales. And then he kind of explained like, okay, yeah, like we did notice that. And we did think that has something to do with the pandemic. But also like during the summer, he said a lot of times they have more sales. So
okay.
It was interesting.
So the data scaffolding, basically the punchline on that was you had ad spend, not every single day, but you're trying to plot a daily situation on ad spend, and that presented itself with issues because there's gaps in the charts. So you had to bolster or scaffold that up by filling in the blanks, and you did that by importing and joining a sheet from Excel with all the dates for the year. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Was that a new technique that you had not used before?
Yeah, I had never used it before. I hadn't heard about it. And then I heard about the term and how it could possibly help me in what I was trying to do. And from there, I was just kind of able to Google it. And, from the community forums, there were several examples of how other people have used it for their data. And I was able to look at that and kind of, just do a little bit of research and then implement it into our own data set.
And did it work in the first try? Did you have to, take a couple stabs at it? What sort of issues did you run into?
So what I first did was I downloaded somebody else's example of a data scaffold and played around with theirs because I didn't really want to, possibly mess up what I had already done. So I played around with somebody else's data scaffold like exampled. And then after playing around with that for a while, I was able to do it basically on the first try on my own data source.
Got it. Okay, that's cool. That's good that you were able to test drive. Now, I'm curious, within Tableau, like how would you characterize your ability to practice good version control? Or does it save history? Do you have multiple copies? How does that work? Because if you're playing around with somebody else's stuff because you don't want to mess up your own, how do you deal with that?
So you can create like another copy of your workbook, and then just like, you can also just undo what you've done with like the undo arrow. But sometimes like I would get like error messages, and I would try to like undo something, and then it would just like mess up the whole thing. So I did have like several copies, like where I would finally get something right and I would save it, and then I would make a copy of it and then start again like where I had left off, and kind of did that.
Okay. Is that something that you practice regularly, or just that you started doing with this project and you saw that it could save you?
Yeah, I've been doing it since we started using Tableau in the classroom, because a lot of times, especially when I was just starting out with Tableau, I didn't know what I had done wrong, and I didn't want to have to start over. So I did get into the habit of saving it and then just going back to it and working on it more.
Good. That's a good habit to have. All right, good. So feedback on that one is, I think you said you used a lot of words to not say very much. And so I think that's just because, you're excited. This is fun, right? So I think that there's probably an opportunity definitely to tighten that up a little bit. And it all gets back to, what was the punchline? What is it? Why was it beneficial? Why was it necessary in this situation? So look, they don't spend money every day, but if you're going to plot this on a chart, that's going to leave gaps, right? So we needed to fill those gaps so that the visualization didn't look all wonky, and you accomplished that through data scaffolding. So this was a new technique. You did some research on Google, you got to practice on a template that had already exhibited, and then you applied it to your situation and it worked out. So lesson learned, you see the value, you understand the process, and then it leaves less rope for me to go try to tangle you up in it, right? I probably could have poked a lot more than I did, but I was just kind of letting you talk. So I was letting you create your own rope, and you didn't tie yourself up, which is a good thing, but it's more like, I think it could have been a minute little boom. And then I've got confidence, you feel good, and we move on to the next question, right?
Right. Yeah. I tend to do that. I tend to like.
Everyone does. They either say not enough or too much. There's little in between. So
Matt, what do you think about kind of giving more context to the project? Because I guess like it depends on how we want to kind of conceptualize this like mock interview. She already in the first part said that she was working with 3 different marketing sources, but maybe reiterate that of saying, look, we had to study 3 different marketing sources of data, and when I tried to combine them together, the charts were broken because there wasn't a date for each individual date within the 2020 calendar year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, so for my view, the way that we're doing this, it's kind of like assumed that I know everything that we've already talked about. That doesn't mean that it's not beneficial. Look, it's sort of like in a normal conversation, would you reiterate or reinforce that thing? Yes or no? If yes, then do it. If not, you feel like it's already there or it doesn't need to be restated. I would say lean towards the side of reinforcement as opposed to a weight. Don't assume that they're caught up, because then that's going to trigger questions, right? If she had started saying something that I didn't think I wasn't on the same page, I would think that most people might behave in this way. I know I do, but I would have probably cut her off and go like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, I don't get it. Like, I'm lost, because I want to be on that same conversational journey with you. And if I'm already off base, then I'm still trying to catch up. So that's not helpful for anyone. So yeah, additional context is helpful. I feel like in that situation, it wasn't as helpful. it might have been good to reinforce sort of what led to the issue. So.
Okay.
Also, you got any more feedback?
For me?
Yeah.
Yeah. More feedback. So I know it's a Zoom conversation, and we're on webcams and all that. So there's a different dynamic just in general. I would say that in person, having these stories really outlined is going to give you confidence in communication, right? So I know I'm not in front of you, so you're not like looking at me. Obviously, you're looking all over the place, and I can tell that the wheels are turning, but they're turning a lot harder than I think they should. And that just comes down to really locking down your story. And the way that I've tried to deal with this in my own past, and what I try to recommend people do, is most interviews have a few key things that they try to get. And you can, Google this to your heart's content, like what they're all trying to solve for. But come up with like 3 to 5 stories that hit on those points so that you've just got those down. You can grab this story. So like you've got your Tableau consulting story down. From this Tableau consulting story, you learned about data scaffolding, you learned about visualization, you learned about communication. So you've got a bunch of stories off the shelf in one. So if you can really lock down that big story and all the different lessons learned, then you can draw on that at the drop of a hat. It'll feel natural. You'll be excited to talk about it, and you're not looking all over the place. You're just focused and like conveying your excitement in the story. And that just comes across with so much more confidence, believability. And I would just feel, as an interviewer, I would have less questions, because I can tell that you know what you're talking about and you lived that, you learned from it. And it's not just you regurgitating things and like reaching for application. You've already thought through, what you learned. And this is why it's important. So I think that would be maybe the last little tidbit there.
So my feedback is, I'm wondering if you, Christina, said extra words to show that you really understood, like you got into the weeds, and got really specific, just to communicate that you really fully, deeply understood what exactly was going on. It seems like maybe the better way to handle that is to start the 5,000 foot view and just kind of lay out that very simple narrative structure. So here's the project, here's the problem, here's the solution. What do you think, Matt?
I think so. Yeah, it's kind of like I said, when I said there was a lot of words, it's like there's this and there's that. And a lot of people, it's really hard to know where that safety zone is. So I always advocate for starting up here and then working your way down as necessary. You don't want to stay up here either, though, because I've had interviews, or I've interviewed people where they're just like, yeah, I did that. And then they stare at you. It's like, tell me, like, I don't want to have to pull the rope, but I also don't want to have it all over the table and you're just like tangled up in it. Right. So there's just use your judgment as far as how the conversation is going. Do you feel like you can button it up here, or do you feel like you got to go here, and then only ever go down below 5,000 feet if the pressure's there, if the questions continue? But if they're nodding and they're following, and you feel like you've got a good beginning, lesson, end, then just let them move on or ask their questions. So just, I don't know, make sure you feel like you've got your bases covered, and not more than necessary unless asked. It's a super vague answer, but that's kind of the way it works.
I do like that framework, and it's actually kind of a similar framework that I use when I'm pitching clients. And they'll say, hey, have you ever done this? Or, have you done any competitive intelligence work? And then I'll just tell them the high level story. And then if they, ask me to drill down on a specific, or they ask me to elaborate, then it kind of goes. But it is a little bit of a trade-off, because if it's so high level, then it's like you don't really say anything. And then if it's too specific, their eyes just glaze over and they're bored.
Everyone overthinks it. So I think the extent to which you really lock down your stories and you feel good about them and you run them by other people, then, practice. I don't think we do enough practice. I think probably in your classroom, like mock interview, things like this are perfect because it gives you all that feedback. But a lot of people just go in completely like, I know my story. And then they're picking up their resume and reading it to the interviewer. It's like, man, just like say it to yourself in a mirror. Gosh dang, like just hear it, like say it. And then you'll learn from that. Even write it down, whatever it is you got to do. And you'll start to figure out what works, what doesn't.
Perfect. All right. It is 2:58. We have 2 minutes left in class. Christina, do you have any questions, or do you want me to let you go 2 minutes early?
I just had a question and I just left my brain. Oh, okay. Yeah. So I know you talked about briefly about kind of like doing like nonprofit or volunteer work. And like, for example, I had somebody kind of reach out to me asking me if I wanted to apply to like this job that they do for like a nonprofit for data visualization after they had seen some of the stuff I had done. And
wait, let's pause there. That's a huge deal. Wait, how did they see your work? From the podcast?
I think it was like the podcast or the how to get an analytics. I can't.
How to get an analytics job.
How to get an analytics job. LinkedIn page, and he's actually a Greensboro College alumni who's like working for Greensboro College. He's just like doing like one adjunct class with music, but his full-time job is like something completely different.
Well, and, like, congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but like currently, like I can't apply for a job right now, but like I go about asking like, okay, I can't really apply for this job. I can't really do that right now, but I would love to, do some visualizations for you, like as voluntarily, like just to get my hands on data and to just get more experience, I suppose.
So your question is, how should you approach that, knowing that you can't take like a full-time job or whatever it is that they're looking for?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you said it's a nonprofit.
Yes.
So yeah, typically nonprofits, they thrive on volunteers and people donating and things like that. So there's probably an opportunity there where you just be honest. I mean, kind of what you just said, it sounds like you've already got a sense for what you want to do and you're looking for affirmation that would be appropriate. And I would say, yes, it is appropriate to sort of say, look, this sounds awesome. I can't actually do that right now, but what I can do, if you're open to it, is offer myself as a volunteer. I'm looking for more experience. These are things I'm good at. And without knowing what the nonprofit is or what they do, I mean, if you have an understanding of what they do, what they're about, maybe you can try to get some ideas for what might be important to them. Like, how's their donor data look? And like, do they have issues with their contact information needing to be cleaned or visualized? Do they understand where their donations are coming from? Do they understand their sources and uses of funds? There's all sorts of rabbit holes that you could go down, but maybe pick one and say like, this is something I'd be interested in exploring if that's a need that you have. Otherwise, I'm open to other volunteer, and give them a sense for like how much time you're willing to commit as well. So that it's not like taken the wrong way as like, oh, sweet, we're going to get her full time, but we don't have to pay her. That's probably not good. You don't want to lead them on as well, but just give them a sense like, look, I'm looking to pick up some extra project work. I'd be willing to do a couple hours a week, whatever it is, something like that.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, I guess I kind of was just looking for like an affirmation of, is that like something normal for me to do? Or would they think I'm like, I don't know, strange?
No, I think it's great. I think it's great because you're building a connection. And I mean, presumably you're not going to be in the situation where you're in right now where you can't take that forever, right? So there would be a time, and even if it's not with them, you're winning brownie points, you're getting experience, you're building rapport, goes on your resume, goes on your LinkedIn. Those people have connections. I mean, it just opens doors. It opens doors. So go for it.
Awesome. Anything else, Christina?
Thank you so much for your feedback. I
No
keep
problem.
freezing.
Thanks for putting yourself out there.
Yeah, Christina, thank you for
Of
being a good
course.
sport. Class
Yeah, no.
dismissed. You can go about your day now. Al, do you want to take over and facilitate the LinkedIn Q&A? I have got to run to the bathroom, but you guys good?
I do want to take over, and you go ahead and handle your business.
All right, I'll be right back.
All right. Matt.
Sir.
I don't want to put undue pressure on you.
Okay.
But you know that you are our 8th guest this season. And 2 of the first 3 were men. First man we've had on in 5 weeks.
Wow.
Since Michael Gold in week 3. So, and the following week was when we started the viewer question segment. So you are officially the first man on this show to face the Superfan quiz. Do you think you're ready?
I hope I am. I hope we're about to find out. That's what I'll say.
Okay, because the ladies have set a very high bar. They haven't got a single question.
I know. I've seen the videos. They've all crushed it. So no pressure. No pressure.
Yeah. I don't know what it would take to get a wrong answer, but hopefully we're not going to find out this week.
Yeah, I don't want to test that for you, but.
Okay. I feel like we should have like some ominous music, like on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But anyway.
Future episode.
3. Yeah, sure. Okay. So, first question from the man with 3 names, Sean Tom Ryan. He asks, what should an analyst say when asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Sub-question, what changes do you see happening in the near future in analytics that would an analyst would have to address with that question?
Yeah, thanks, Sean Tom Ryan, for the question.
Nailed it.
And so the very classic, where do you see yourself in 5 years? It really does happen. I ask it to people all the time. I'll be honest, it's not hard to get wrong, but it's all in the message. What is the message you're trying to send to this potential employer? Like, is it that, oh, this is just a stepping stone job to me, or I have no idea what I'm doing, but I want your job, wink, wink, that sort of, like, all those answers that I've heard people actually say are good ideas are not good ideas. So don't do that. I would say have a sense for, if you really want this job, hopefully you do, if you're interviewing for it, have a sense for what the company is, what they're about, where are they headed, right? And if you know that they're on a growth trajectory, then say, look, I'm excited about this role. I see how it's going to contribute to the company, specifically in analytics. It's like, look, analytics is booming. I'm excited to get in and cut my teeth and learn with the company. And as the company continues to grow, hopefully more opportunities will present themselves. And I want to be positioned to, learn more about those. But right now, I'm really focused on this role, right? So you kind of open that door, but you're also not like overly ambitious or overly aggressive about it. If it's a company that maybe is not doing so well, or if they're on a more flat trajectory, then just talk about your love for the company and your interest in getting in and supporting what they do and being a part of that process. And, in 5 years, you'll have 5 years under your belt doing this. And hopefully by then you'll have sort of carved out some level of expertise, and maybe you're finding new ways to add value. And if that leads to other opportunities, then so be it. So you're not being like super pointed, but you're also not, cutting it out to say like, I don't want this unless I can grow. And again, people who get hung up on this question are usually like really ambitious, right? Or actually, I take that back. You could have the mentality you just want a place to go sit for the next 30 years and still get kind of ruffled by this question, because you're like, should I say that I want your job as a manager? How do you respond? So I think
you start overthinking it.
Yeah. All roads go back to just be honest and relate it to the company and what they do and how you fit within them. I think that's really what I would say is a message there, is like, make sure that what you want fits with where they're headed. And then as far as what changes do I see happening in the near future? I mean, I don't know that I need to get specific in that it's constantly changing. Everything is changing. Technology changes, the fields change. analytics changes. People almost use data science and data analytics interchangeably these days. So who knows, maybe analysts won't even be a thing and scientists will take over the world. I have no idea, but I would just say that in order to be, prepared or make sure that you're accommodating to the changes, be part of the conversation, be active on LinkedIn, follow people, follow trends, make sure that you're aware of what's going on. It's part of any community that you belong to, right? You should be abreast to the changes that are happening. And the rules of the game are always going to change. You just got to decide if you want to keep playing. That's it. So if you're an analyst through and through and you want to keep playing the game no matter what, stay in the news, make sure you're on top of changes and keep playing. Like, that's it. So.
Yeah, we don't do soundbite clips on this show, but if we did, that would be it right there. The rules of the game are going to change, but you got to decide if you want to keep playing. I think that's the winner.
There you go.
So the second question from Pooja Chavan, who gives us great questions every week. And this one's very personal. She says, what technical skills are required for transitioning from a career gap? For context, she's been a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. The last couple of years, she's been upskilling like crazy with LinkedIn Learning and another platform we won't name because they don't sponsor the show. But what technical skills does she need to go from that wonderful experience to the data analytics field?
Yeah. Thanks, Pooja, for the question. And I'm going to probably say this for all the questions because I hear them a lot. Like this is a very common concern. You've got a lot of eyes on analytics, a lot of people wanting to get into it. And so you've got folks who they've got some experience, maybe for some reason they had a gap in their career at one time or another. And they've been, taking courses, reading books, trying to do, build a project portfolio on Tableau, whatever it is that they're doing. They're trying to paint themselves or build their profile as if they're an analyst. And to all of those things, I say, that's great as long as, number one, you're learning and you're enjoying it and you can keep doing it. So I think a lot of people get so obsessed with the signing up for courses, not necessarily even finishing them, signing up for, different learnings and buying books and not actually reading them and, trying to look the part, that we forget that, if you just go on LinkedIn, if you want to be an analyst and you want to work in a specific place, there is a world out there on LinkedIn where you can go in, research that job, see if there's positions available. If not, or if so, go find people with those titles at those companies and be a normal human and interact with them. Ask them questions. People love to talk about themselves as long as you're not presumptuous and like, yo, give me a job, like that sort of thing. People don't like that, obviously. But if you reach out and say, hey, I've been researching this company and I see that you're working in this role. I see your background. I'm just interested to know a little bit about your journey. Can you share with me a little bit, or can we do a Zoom call, or if they're local, maybe offer to buy them coffee, maybe post-COVID, whatever it is. But I think I'm getting a little bit off track, but the thing is, I feel like people in this position see this insurmountable mountain in front of them of, dear God, I'm behind the 8 ball. I want to get into this field, but I got to learn Python, learn SQL, learn Excel, learn Tableau, learn Power BI, code in DAX, do all of this stuff. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You just gotta figure out that role you want and then figure out what you need to do to get there. You're not climbing the mountain, you're getting to base camp, or you're getting to that next level. And it's going to be a much more bite-sized view. So instead of obsessing over like the constant upskilling stuff, focus on the next possible thing and then have conversations, because I don't think that first hurdle, that first job is nearly as high as a lot of people think it is. If you have a willingness to learn and you've got some basic skills and you can get in with a company, even if it's not an analyst title, I mean, if you can get in like an accounting role or something where you're dealing with some data coming from some information system, that could be a good foot in the door where you start to build that rapport, show interest, buddy up with the right people, and take on special projects. And next thing you know, you're working your way in. So there's a lot of different ways to go about this. And I could probably talk for an hour on this one alone, but I'll stop there.
Pretty sure we could easily do an entire show on this topic. And,
I guarantee you could. I guarantee it.
Yeah. I'm sure Pooja will be in the chat on Friday, so I'm sure she can re-engage if there's any loose ends there.
Yeah, for sure.
So our very own Tactical Thursday commander, Dr. Daniel Hull, asks about your company, which designs data products for nonprofits. And so we've talked before on the show about nonprofits being a good way to build your portfolio and start getting some projects where maybe there's not the stress of getting a for-profit job where there's a rigorous interview process. They're generally happy just to get someone in there that's willing to work for them. So his question is, how would you translate nonprofit data results or projects into the for-profit world?
Well, thank you, Dr. Hall, is it? Daniel, for the question. And I've heard of this thing where for-profit businesses have been known to snub people coming from nonprofit space. And I can't say that I understand that. I can't say that I've seen it personally. I've heard it anecdotally. So with that in mind, like that's kind of my context for this question, is I'm wondering if that's kind of where this is coming from. But if I'm wrong, we can clear that up. But what I would say is, like, remove the focus of the type of entity and focus on the work, focus on the data, focus on the task, like what's being done. So how would you translate the value of the nonprofit data results for a for-profit interview, right? So it's possible I'm misinterpreting this. It's almost like, how do you compare what you've been observing in a nonprofit space as translatable to a for-profit? So if that's the case, I can address that as well. But carrying on with that initial point, if you have experience with nonprofit and, you know, maybe you're volunteering, kind of like Christina just talked about, and she has an opportunity potentially to volunteer with a nonprofit and get access to data and perform a project, like there's value in what she's done. There's value in working through data, coming up with whatever it is she comes up with, accomplishing that task, and then being able to speak to that experience. It doesn't matter the type of entity that she's performing that work for. Now, if let's say it was somewhere that she's having to like actually run results and look at a financial statement, or, you know, we're dealing with a nonprofit fund accounting and different KPIs that they're looking at, and like, well, that doesn't necessarily translate to a for-profit. It's like, you know what? They have sources and uses of funds, right? Businesses, they make money somehow, and then they spend money another way. So the extent to which you understand the way that the business operates, the business model, what the point is, where the information is coming from, and what it's used for, you know, a KPI should be there in order to help guide the business. Your analysis should be there to help make smarter decisions. Doesn't matter what type of entity you're coming from. So just because you measure something a little bit differently doesn't mean there's not value in the measurement and the evaluation of different measures, right? So I would, kind of the very first thing that I said is I would focus on the task, focus on the intent, and focus on the skills. It really doesn't matter the type of entity. I know that a lot of industries like to feel like they're all unique snowflakes and everything that they do is super unique. But you know what? Money and numbers, man. I mean, data is data. And yes, there's nuance in every industry. And the extent to which you take the time to learn about that nuance, then you're good to go. So that's it. That's what I got there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's interesting. He may want to follow up with you on it's an interesting point about for-profit sector sometimes discounting nonprofit work, and maybe it relates to what I kind of rambled on about in the question was it's free work. So there's not the same barrier to entry for the labor. You signed on in many situations, you may come in and just say, I'm willing to work, and they say, we're happy to have you, rather than having a formal interview process so anybody can get in the door. So I'm sure that's not the case at all nonprofits. Maybe that's the bias there.
Yeah, and it could be, and I feel like that's really easy to overcome unless it's it's just a non-starter. In which case, again, I'm going to fall back on my thing. You don't want to work there anyway if that's the way that they're going to behave.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So number 4 comes from the lady with a 5-syllable first name, Shali Prithika Mani. She says, or asks, sorry, what level of technical skills do you expect from a candidate that's fresh out of college? And kind of what are the baseline technical skills required to do entry-level jobs that you hire for?
Hello, Shali Prithika. Nice. Thank you for the question.
Well done.
So hopefully. Another classic question that I get a lot of, and I feel like some of these analytics programs are doing a pretty good job these days of getting people exposure to the different tools, right? The different tools that are in an analyst tool set. So usually by the time they come out, they might have some exposure to Python or SQL or Excel or something like that. Not to say that they actually know how to use it or deploy it. Some do, some don't. And even if you don't, this is more job specific. And I think it comes back to, again, not overthinking it. So there's not really a minimum level of skill. You have to have your why. You have to know why you want to do what it is you want to do. Demonstrate that you've put in effort to, get that ball moving. And then when you've identified a role that you want to work for, understanding what they're looking for. And if they happen to be looking for Excel or Python, then understand what entry level looks like. So I can't speak to every specific tool and every specific job and say that you need to be able to, do this in that tool, like do inner joins in SQL. Like I don't know what every job is going to require. I think my guidance is always going to be don't overthink it. I'm a well-documented advocate for Excel because the vast majority of companies operate very heavily on Excel. So if you have some, I'll call it basic to intermediate level of Excel skill, that actually puts you in contention for a lot of jobs. I know like big jobs, Fortune 500 companies, they may have certain requirements, but most of the companies out there, man, a lot of them are just looking to hire their first analyst, which is kind of scary, but could be something that you're looking into. And if you know how to, build Excel, deal with data tables, maybe do some Power Query, something like that, then you'd be ahead of the game, I think, in that regard. So I know that's not a very good answer to that question. I think you got to look at the role and make sure that at a minimum, you're demonstrating a willingness to learn and that you've taken whatever steps you can to say, like, I'm trying to learn. And if you've got that willingness, a lot of companies are willing to train you for an entry-level job. They don't just expect you to come in and be an expert.
Yeah. It's a funny story. When I first met John David and his former partner on the show, the advice they gave me was concentrate on Excel. So
yeah,
I kind of listened, but I'm not that great at advice. So okay, so final question comes to us from a first timer, and her name is Aziza Eif, and the Eif is spelled E-I-F-F-E, and she told me it rhymes with beef. So good.
Yeah.
Hopefully I nailed it. Seems pretty easy.
All right.
Question, she says she's planning to go into data analytics and she has no experience. However, she does have 10 years of experience in customer service. So she wants to know, in your experience of transitioning from the finance sector into pure analytics, how did you use your finance experience as an advantage when going into more pure analytics jobs? And how did you highlight your soft skills or whatever was transferable from what you were doing initially?
Hi, Aziza. Thanks for the question. And man, these, like I said, these are all classics. I think this is a good one.
They're all essay questions. Yeah, we don't do fill in the blank.
So customer service, I think the important thing is there's a lot of people who are looking to shift careers, right? Again, analytics is all the rage. People want to get into it, especially if they've got the mentality for critical thinking, analytical thinking. They like data, maybe they like math. So there's an attractiveness to this field. So what I would say, my advice specific to Aziza would be dependent on whether she is currently in that role or that we're talking about a gap, right? Because if you're currently in a role, but you're wanting to transition, something that people tend to overlook is the idea that you already have a job. You're already in a company doing a role. Look around you. Like, what was that? Like, thing number one, I said, like, be curious as an analyst. So if you're in customer service, there's got to be data that you're producing, right? I don't want to make assumptions, but let's just pretend that in customer service, you're dealing with call center or something like that, right? Or even if you're not in call center, you're dealing with how many customers are we dealing? Do we have any service level agreements? Are we achieving them? You know, somebody is looking at data around your area. I can just about guarantee it, depending on the size of the company, the type of the company, but I can just about guarantee somebody is watching you. And the extent to which you understand what they're looking at, you understand how you could potentially influence those numbers, maybe start having conversations around certain things that are getting tracked and get yourself involved in that process. Maybe even come up with new ways or spotting trends or things that, hey, you know, I noticed that we're staffed at this time window, but our peak call volume happens here. You know, offering things like that, you can start to cut your teeth and transition yourself internally in a company just by being curious and taking initiative. Nobody's going to stop you if you're adding value, right? That's just the thing. Now, if we're talking about a gap situation, it's not completely dissimilar, except that you would have to you're being much more referential to, I had this experience and this is what I learned about data during that experience. So I learned about SLA, service level agreements, and making sure that we're trending on, you know, certain thresholds and tracking, and that we're watching these metrics. And I understood what the inputs were, and the information system we used was over here. And I was aware. So you can take your past experience and put an analytical lens over it and talk about it like you're an analyst, right? View it from that perspective. And I think your ability to do that, to convey this value proposition that analysts have to a past experience, I think is something that should resonate with somebody if they're you know, looking for new people. And I'll tell you what, I've hired people who come from completely different areas, and some of them were like the best hires I've ever made, right? They bring this curiosity. That's what brought them there. They're interested in this field. It wasn't just this presumption all along. So they bring a different perspective, and it's shocking sometimes, like how talented people can be if there's a passion there. And then from my own experience transitioning from finance to analytics, I think I've kind of said, like, from my view, I never transitioned from anything, right? It was just kind of like, I've always been dealing with data and analytics. The data just happened to be financial, right? And so it's the same concept that, okay, I went from a commercial banking loan analyst where I'm spreading financial statements, looking at financial metrics, trying to understand risk and evaluate cash flow and certain key metrics, to, after my MBA, I got in with Travelocity and their parent company doing more proper analytics, right? So I wanted to zoom in, and that was when I really started, I think, cutting my teeth in the data sphere, because it's like, look, I had already seen the high level spreading financial statements. I wanted to get down and dirty in one company and learn what makes it tick. Well, it's a lot more than just more than just like dollars. There's all sorts of data being collected all over the place. So my ability to understand, okay, I was using one information system in the past. Now I have access to all of these, and they all tell a different story. Again, it's just transferring skills. It's transferring your experience and how it relates to what you're doing.
Probably some customer service data involved there as well. So
all the time. All the time.
So she's probably got some domain knowledge that can be sold to a data field as well.
Yeah. Operational and sales are two areas that I've gotten a lot of experience in. That seems I don't run into a lot of other analysts who have that kind of. A lot of it's very marketing centric or financial. So having that breadth is also it's very beneficial. So again, having that extra set of experiences, don't look at it as a detriment. Like, look at it as a value. Like, you bring a different perspective, you bring a different skill set, and you know how to apply what they want to that. Therefore, you know, you're adaptable. I think that's a very critical skill as well, being adaptable.
Matt Bratton, you've set the bar high as the first man to brave the dreaded Supervan quiz. You are 5 for 5. Well done.
Perfect. Well, that was fun. hopefully I did those questions sufficient justice, but if not, yeah, I'll be on the live chat, and I look forward to following up as needed.
Hey,
I'd be willing to bet that all 5 of them will be there with you. So they can trim it up as needed.
So I have been locked out of the Zoom call for the past, I don't know how many minutes. So I hope I didn't miss anything. I went to the bathroom, and came back, and it said program not responding. So anytime I try to turn my camera on, I'm cut out. So man, this podcast has just been plagued with tech issues with Christina and now on my end. But Matt, I think you guys have wrapped up all 5 questions now, right?
We're good. Clear.
Perfect timing.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This was just hugely valuable. So where can people find you?
Where can people find me? I would say LinkedIn. Go track me down on LinkedIn for sure. And I love connecting. I love meeting new people and, chatting about experiences. And if I have time to give feedback, I'll absolutely do that. If there's questions, one of the things I'm interested in doing as part of my channel is kind of doing a little bit of what we've done here, where I have an opportunity to talk about people's resumes, give them feedback on projects. So that could be something that I would be interested in checking out prospects of doing. So that you can see that on my YouTube channel as well. And then obviously tmbanalytics.com is where I'm very slowly starting in the analytical education sphere, just trying to promote certain skills and help people that are interested in getting in, moving up, and ascending in their careers. So all fun stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it and appreciate it.